All right, all right. I'm so excited for today's podcast interview with one of my dear favorite clients and friends, Dr. Sara Trammel out of Abilene, Texas. Dr. T, thanks for joining me today on the Fierce Factor.
Of course, glad to be here.
I kind of feel like this is the maybe 10th time we've recorded a podcast together, because every time we have a chat, we're like, gosh, if we could have only recorded that, I think we can kind of go off on a tangent. All the things.
Yeah, we should have saved that conversation.
I know, exactly. So I thought it would be so appropriate for us to kind of take some of the stuff that we talk about, on a regular basis on our calls, and the things that I know all of our listeners are dying to hear about, how someone like you has just experienced such incredible success in a small town. I'd love for you to open up and just tell us a little bit about you and your experience, and a little bit about Abilene too. Like, what is Abilene, Texas?
Where is Abilene, Texas is probably probably the most asked question, right? So we'll start with that. So Abilene is 3 hours west of Dallas, 2 hours west of Fort Worth. So we are between Lubbock and Dallas-Fort Worth. We're 3 hours from Austin. I mean, we're just kind of really out in the middle of nowhere, to be honest with you. And we're a town of about 120,000 people. So small, rural, West Texas town. But I will say this town has, I've always said I wouldn't have necessarily wanted to live here as a single young female, but as a mom and an entrepreneur and as part of a family, it is one of the greatest places I've ever been. I've kind of made the tour of Texas between schooling and training, and I've been in Abilene now 14 years. So my husband grew up here. And that's how we ended up back here. So most people have some story of they either grew up here or they married somebody that grew up here. But anyway, so yeah, the Abilene is a great town. We are really kind of isolated out here. So there's not really, if people are going elsewhere for things, whether it's doctors or obviously in our case, medical aesthetics, they're driving quite a ways. So 2 hours to Fort Worth, or like I said, 2.5 hours to Lubbock. And I've gathered those people, I've gathered a group of those people who have just said, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. But it is a pretty much isolated place, but full of football, full of hay and cattle and all the things that you can think of, horses when you come to West Texas. But
yes, and you have like the bougiest Texas attire, the boots, and I feel like I could see you in a belt buckle and like a bolo or something. I'm just loving it, the fancy version.
Yeah, I've learned to dress the West Texas part, so try not to play too much into it. But yes, we have beautiful steaks, we have delicious food, we have beautiful sunsets, and decent enough weather. So when it's not 110 degrees in the middle of summer. But
I love it. So mother-in-law is happy. So let's talk a little bit about, it sounds like you definitely identified a gap, that there were a lot of people that were driving in 3 hours to get to Dallas or 2 hours to Fort Worth to see an aesthetic provider. Is that sort of, did that contribute to why you decided to open an aesthetic practice? Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Sure. So, my background is that I went to medical school directly after college, did family practice, and graduated in 3 years with that. And my husband is a neurosurgeon. And so we were doing training together, and I did our training in Dallas area. I did a variety of different things, including start having 3 kids in 4 years. And so that really took precedence for my practice, as you would say, I guess. I did urgent care. I never opened just a typical family practice. I did like I said, a variety of different things. Over the last 14 years, I have been doing hospice. I did urgent care. I did university medicine. So we have a couple of universities here. I did work at my husband's office doing pre-op screening. So all of this very part-time, but the reason I got into aesthetics was just kind of a happenstance. So a friend who's an OB-GYN was running the medical spa that the hospital had opened, and they needed help. They were having to do these Texas requirements of having new patients seen by upper level, either physicians or nurse practitioners. They were a little bit overwhelmed. I was a good client, and I think they roped me in and said, hey, why don't you come learn how to do some of this? And so I did, and I did that for about 3 years, very part-time. And as that business for them transitioned for a variety of reasons, and it just didn't end up working with the hospital's kind of scheme, they closed that. And all of a sudden I realized, not only do I have my very own Botox addiction, but I had the ability to provide this service to people. And it started literally with friends and my husband's coworkers and his staff at his office who had been treating for several years, who said, well, what are we supposed to do now? And so I literally ordered a couple of bottles and injected his office staff. I injected some of our friends up in his office, and then we started doing Botox parties. And for whatever opinions people have on that, I'm a big fan of a Botox party, given the correct circumstances. I had a $40 box that I purchased on Amazon with all of my supplies in it, and I took it around. I set up things at friends' kitchens. Like I said, I saw people in my husband's office. We went to different businesses that wanted to partner with us. One of my really good friends is my nail technician, and she had me set up in her pedicure room, and she had a list of 15 people that wanted treatment. And we did that for a couple of months, and it was amazing. Each week she had more and more and more. And I would just go spend a couple of days up there. And I had paper charts. I followed them all up myself. Obviously, I was the only employee, and I made phone calls and I checked on them, 7-10 days later to make sure everything was okay. And they really were drawn to the personal aspect of me being not only the one injecting them as a physician, but then also me being the one to follow up with them. And I would see them if I needed to tweak a few things here and there. And so I really developed that trust. And that's also what is the ability in a small town, is that I knew so many people from different charitable work that I had done, different organizations I had been with. And so I had a decent, I would think, reputation from just being a part of this community. And it allowed me the ability to kind of go out and have trust right away with patients. And so once I realized that this was actually becoming something that more than 10 people wanted, I needed a facility. And I thought that the mobile aspect of kind of being able to move around and provide my Botox service to people, that as it came to be more convenient for them, we did a variety of internet searches and looking into things and came up with this airstream Argosy. 1974, the bus. So the beauty bus, the beauty bus, the original idea was my car. So, that's kind of what the original picture was my car. And then we ended up finding this airstream on Craigslist, no doubt. Yeah. And so I drove to Dallas in my husband's truck, because of course we all drive trucks. So I drove the truck and I picked it up and paid the man some cash. He hooked it up for me and I drove straight back, because I still to this day am not a very good reverser with the trailer, but I can drive straight for a really long time. So anyway, so yeah, we brought it home. My husband and I literally gutted the thing. My kids helped. It was really a family project over spring break. We gutted it all. We laid flooring, and then we had some professionals actually do some of the work. And so we have the bus, and then all of a sudden I started taking it and I had my own spot which gave me my own ability to kind of regulate, you know, whether it's cleanliness or space or lighting, all the things. So kitchens are great and I don't have any problems with them, but this gave me the ability to kind of have a little bit more control over my space.
Yeah.
So we did that and did that for quite a while. Well, a few months, and then it just kind of started turning over and over and just gaining speed. And next thing I know, I needed more space.
Right. Yeah. So it's so interesting because I think that there are plenty of listeners to this podcast who are like, okay, it just sounds like, you know, just rolled out with some Botox and like, you know, I'm envisioning you just like rolling around on this Airstream bus, injecting Botox everywhere. And what, you know, our listeners, you know, don't know is that you're running a 7-figure business. You know, you went from like, it was sort of a fun, okay, let's see where this goes. There's a demand. But then there's kind of that stage 2, right? And that's where like, okay, now we're sort of even outgrowing this like fun idea. And not only now I've built a clientele, I'm getting these, you know, these word of mouth referrals. And now it's time to even expand. And I have the ability to service these clients that I have in a different way. And then starting to bring on sort of new procedures, right? And like the business is now growing. So let's talk about that stage, kind of like that next stage 2. And, you know, was it all just sort of, it kind of just kept growing and it was supernatural? Or were there some things that were challenges for you that you felt like, you know, these are like, this is a challenge that I'm facing in, you know, taking my business from its infancy into sort of this teenage or growing up level?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, when I look back on it, it is funny because I literally did just start doing it because I wanted it and because I had friends who wanted it. And, but yeah, all of a sudden I kind of woke up and I really, thankfully, at least I wasn't trying to be a very successful business. My goal was not necessarily to make money, which I think served me very well at the beginning. I mean, I obviously wasn't doing it to lose money, but that was not my driving force. And so it allowed me to really, without even knowing it at the time, take some moments. I did. I mean, it started with patients saying, well, when are you going to do my lips? I was like, oh gosh, I don't know that that's necessarily in my wheelhouse right now. Like I'm not comfortable enough with the amount of training that I've had to do that because, you know, I just had not had enough experience. So I had to take a moment and I was like, okay, they just keep asking and they keep wanting more. And so I took some time and I went and did training, which as a physician is a little bit difficult, I will say. I want to Google filler training and get the best. I want to know who it is, the one place to go to get the best training. So that's kind of how, as we go through medicine, we apply for residency, we apply for fellowships, we do these things and we do all this research to get the best training. And I will say that was one of my disappointments with aesthetics, and this was 3 years ago, is that, you know, I didn't have a good answer. There wasn't, all the Google searches in the world were very overwhelming to all of the businesses that were out there trying to gather in all these people who wanted to get into aesthetics. And I didn't feel like the different trainings that I did at the very beginning were necessarily the most beneficial.
Meaning like the manufacturer trainings, like
it wasn't even the manufacturer trainings. It was these, I don't want to call them names, but it was these businesses that just do these mass weekend. I mean, just the horror stories that people talk about, these, you know, that you come in for a weekend and in 6 hours you get certified to do Botox and you get certified to do lip filler. And I literally was teaching the lip filler and the Botox to these poor people who were, I'm not kidding. Like they were there and I thought, and I had already kind of been doing it a little bit. And I was like, oh no, let me tell you a few things. Like, here's a few ways to look at the musculature of the face. And this is how you actually assess a face for Botox. It's not just 5 points that you stick a needle in. You know, you really need to have the understanding. And I had the benefit of having gone through medical school and having taken anatomy. And I'm not saying that you have to be a physician by any means. My face has been injected by all kinds of non-physicians. But there is just a level of understanding and knowledge about the anatomy that you get from medical school. So, I was disappointed in my training situation. I finally figured out to just get private training. I found people that I admired their work online, and I went and trained with them. I paid money and I spent time. And I mean, I've spent a lot of money and a lot of my personal time away from my family getting trained. But I learned from the very beginning, I think you've got to get over your own ego of, this isn't that hard, like anybody can do this, which is, I think, what we get a lot right now on the internet and Instagram, is you get thousands and thousands of injectors, and some of them are doing decent work, or at least they're showing their decent work on Instagram. I think we should have a rule of, you should have to show every person that you inject every day, and then we'll decide, who's doing a good job and who's not. Because even still, there's days that I see patients and I do a procedure and I'm like, man, I'm not happy with that. Like that's not what I wanted. But it's not a matter of not doing it correctly. It's just life. Like, not everything's going to go the way that you first plan it.
Totally. Well, it's so complicated because, I mean, you can't, I'm laughing, but also like kind of have a pit in my stomach about the truth that, you can look how many years you went to medical school to get your medical degree, but somebody can easily go to a weekend course and then say that they're an injector. And because of the access, the low barrier to entry with social media, how is a consumer supposed to know the difference? There's also, good or bad before and after photo, like in terms of like really quality, authentic imagery. You don't know what's real, and then besides that, just from an experience standpoint, it's getting to know patient expectations, and every person's different and how they respond to treatments different, and so it is complicated. And I think it needs to be taken seriously. What do you think, so finding just where to even go to get educated, and obviously, I know manufacturers try their best. And we've had conversations offline about this too. But, what are some of the other resources that you felt like as you were starting your business were missing for small business owners? Because I know you're going to be giving a talk here on the speaker circuit for AmSpa. And this is one topic that you feel passionate about because you had to kind of do it independently, being out on your own, and not right. And where you have another injector to collab with, where do you think there could be additional support, or maybe advice that you could give to somebody who is really leaning on manufacturer for resources?
Well, I find that I had a hard time with the manufacturers. That was the training that I'd received when I was at the other med spa. And like you said, they do their best, but most of them are more sales reps than they are treatment reps. So, I can't speak to any changes that they've made in the last 3 years, but like I said, I went to the private market, and I mean, I'm happy to give a list of names that of people who do a good job, but I think, Pallet Resources is one that they have really highly trained individuals who go and do very hands-on training. It's difficult as a physician, and this was something that I learned, especially in the state of Texas. Physicians can't go outside of the state of Texas and inject. So it's based on your medical license. And so I was either bound to Texas, which granted is a lot of places, but I was either bound to Texas, so I went out to California because I followed, some people that I really thought that they were very good, and they were great, even just to see them inject and how they inject, but I wasn't able to do anything hands-on. So I spent a weekend out there, and Lori Robertson was who it is. And she's super talented, and she was very helpful to me. And a learner that can learn just by watching, which is helpful. But it wasn't until I really got hands-on with anatomy training, and I did, I'm going to sound like a commercial now, but Chris Zurich did an injection academy. Now it's owned by AmSpa, but I went to his course, and it's cadaver course, which I kind of was like, oh, sheesh, I spent a whole year with a cadaver. I don't know that I want to spend any more time dealing with a cadaver, but it allowed me to really have that hands-on ability without somebody screaming or fussing or getting upset. Like there was something to being able to do things hands-on and feel how it works without worrying about doing harm to somebody. And so I'm a huge fan of anatomy classes. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, hands-on. And then I spent some time out with Tui Doan. She's a physician who has a story similar to mine, and of this transition. She was an ER physician and then got into aesthetics. And, I think there's a little bit of a hesitancy, or at least there was on my part, of I didn't want to be seen as the physician who went and took the weekend course and then opened up her practice. Like, I didn't want the other physicians in town to roll their eyes at me or to think, what in the heck is she doing? Like, why does she think she is, trusted to do these things? And I had those own concerns about myself for quite a while. But once I finally started gaining enough confidence and I got some good cases under my belt and literally just experience, I still to this day have moments where I think, am I really trained to do this? What other procedure it may be. And it took a while. It took a lot of trial and error to become more confident with each and every, thing that I took on.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes for everything in life, right? I mean, that's the clinical side, but all the other things too. It's like there's that having to trust yourself and your instincts of, all right, I'd like a little more, but then also the practical application of it, because you really can't get great at something until you've spent 10,000 hours mastering it.
Absolutely. And I finally had to have a moment with myself at one point. It was actually after I came back from the anatomy course, and I'd been doing this for almost a year and a half. And I was just hesitant on using a cannula. I was hesitant about certain areas of the face that I wanted to inject. And I finally sat myself down and said, you are well-trained. You know what you're doing. You have figured this out. Quit fussing about it. Just do it. And, it really was an enlightening moment. And again, not every single case is perfect, but, I have safely injected lots of faces and have had really good results. And really, it's just sometimes a matter of you've done the work. Now you just have to trust yourself.
Yeah. And I love this word trust keeps coming up. I mean, it's like as if trust is really the currency, because if you've done your job to effectively give clinical care, whether it's injecting or whatever else service that you're doing for your patient, and then you have done the work on how to handle an adverse reaction, and you're like, that you're going to make sure that patient's taken care of no matter what, and that comes with them trusting you.
Yeah. And I think that's part of being in a small town. There's obviously good and bad. Guess what? Something bad goes wrong, or something unfortunately happens. I'm going to hear about it. It's going to be somebody's mom or somebody's friend or somebody's friend of the friend, or I'm going to run into them at the grocery store. So not that that's my driving force for obviously doing a good job, but there is that underlying realization that I'm not just treating the masses here. I don't get to just throw things out at people and hope that it went well. I am required by my own conscience to do my best work and to follow up and to keep track of these people, because again, word of mouth and reputation from that way and that has been my biggest selling point. And that is how I've honestly built my success. I say that probably 75-90% of my success has all been just from word of mouth. And still to this day, 3 days later, I mean, I'm always amazed that there's still more people that come in that are new, and it's not a matter of my advertising. It's a matter of word of mouth of our patients.
I love that. And have patients driving from Dallas to come see you.
I have two.
Ah!
Isn't that funny? I literally had this girl show up at my office, and I said, you know, obviously area codes nowadays, it's not like it used to be 20 years ago, but for some reason I was like, why? I know, who are you? Basically, like, do you live here? What do you do? And she's like, oh, I live in Dallas. I was like, oh, and you drove here just to see me? She said, yeah. Yes, I saw your stuff, and so told me that you're really good. And I was like, oh, wow. So it was hilarious. I took a picture with her. I was like, you're my furthest driving patient ever.
Oh, I see.
Reverse transport.
Patients coming.
Yeah.
So let's talk to the business side. So now you've got several employees. You're not just operating in a bus. You got your physical location now. Let's kind of talk about then that we'll call that stage 3, and bringing people on. What's the biggest mindset shift that you've had to make as you have, been kind of this budding aesthetic, physician into now I'm a real businesswoman?
Well, I think just the realization that this was a real live business. So even today, I woke up after having been off for a week, and I thought, oh, I've got a business to run. I've got a business to go back to. So I would have never, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, if I was going to ever be a business owner, I would have said, no, we don't do that in medicine, which is true. I mean, very few doctors even are privately owned entities any longer. So my husband being one of them, but we tend to be fairly independent little cusses at this house, I guess. The transition from it just being me, because I will say the simplicity of no employees was what I loved, and not having to answer to anybody, not having to worry about anyone. And again, I guess the word of the day, trust anyone. So I was very hesitant about expanding or bringing on anyone else, because I wasn't sure how to do it. I had never learned how to necessarily manage people other than my family. And so thankfully, my first employee, I drug my feet. I can still remember I was on vacation with my family, my mom and sisters, and they were like, what you doing? I was like, I need to hire somebody. And they're like, well, who are you going to hire? I was like, there's this one girl who I really want that I worked with before, and I would trust her to come, but I just can't quite bite the bullet. I can't be responsible for her financial success. Like, I don't want to be the reason that she quits another job and then she comes to work for me, and I don't know how to compensate her or what is even fair. And I can't stand to just be responsible for her financial success. So we talked for several weeks, and she basically convinced me finally that she would be fine. So I hired her in January, or we talked in January. She started in February of 2020. And so 6 weeks later, we got the notice in Texas that we were to close. And so that obviously became super interesting. But she and I had a great relationship. We had worked together at the med spa at the hospital. I was super familiar with her general personality, her work ethic. I didn't know anything. She wasn't even an esthetician when we worked together before. She was the front desk salesperson. But I had sat in with her and watched her interact with patients for years. And I knew that was who I wanted. And she came with amazing talents. She had actually, over the few years that we had been apart, had gone on to doing microblading and all kinds of permanent makeup, and had become very good at that on her own. And so it was a great incorporation, and we have still a great relationship. And she brought a whole nother aspect to my business, and it was fun to have somebody around. So all of a sudden I realized that I didn't necessarily have to do every single thing. I was literally skin pinning people, and, thank God I wasn't doing facials. I wouldn't even know where to begin, but, I knew, and again, my clients and my patients really pushed me into, hey, what about this? And what about that? And when are you going to learn to do this? And when are you going to give us this service? And so I have just let them kind of guide me over the last 3 years into what they want and what they need. And have tried to be pretty open to that and just seeing what happens. So Deanna started and we had a great time together. And then all of a sudden the business, literally, it was like a snowball, and it got to be so full and busy. And again, I wasn't, this was something that I learned from you, but I put it to practice without even knowing it. But I hired my second esthetician simply because Deanna liked her. And she said, hey, I know you were thinking about maybe hiring somebody else, but this may be the person. Like, she just seems like a good person. And so I interviewed her, hired her on the spot. She was new out of school. And so, Cheyenne, she came with a lot of different positives and some negatives, but some things that really were amazing to me were just her work ethic and her basic personality. We taught her to do a lot of things, and that was fun. It was fun for Deanna to get to be in that supervisor role. And it was fun for me to learn, how to manage people and how to be a mentor and how to be a helper and be positive and really encourage younger people getting into any industry, but especially in this industry, to kind of run with the ball and learn how to do things independently. My goal for anybody that is my employee is more schooling and to go further in life. Like, they don't have to stay with me forever and ever. I would be happy for them to go off and open their own business someday and to be successful. Or one of Cheyenne's wanting to go to PA school. And I'm like, great, please go. I told her, even in my interview, I said, my goal for you always is to get more education and to do bigger things. So
I love that.
This is a good stepping stone.
I mean, that's great leadership. And that's, I think, being self-aware about, one, when you talk about that mindset shift of, I was scared to hire, I didn't want to take on the responsibility, the trusting, right? Answering to other people, worrying about other people, and trusting other people. I think 100% of us have that feeling, right? But spending time there and addressing those feelings that you have and making that part of the conversation with that employee, that, look, here's realistically where I am. Here's what my goals are. Here's what I can offer you and can offer you. And then, something else too, for you listeners as well, something we talk about is always be recruiting ABR, right? So always be recruiting. So many times we're like jammed up, so busy, we don't even have time to hire and time to onboard somebody because we're like, this is stressful now. This, it is a project. It's going to take you, bringing an employee on and training them properly in your business is going to take you away from working in and on your business. It is. And so the worst thing that can happen, by waiting, is that you end up in this boomerang where you're not training properly, or you're rushing to find somebody. So you're calling someone, like a recruiter, like, plug in a PA for me, right? Whereas instead, look at your model on the other, it sounds kind of contradictory when you're thinking of rapid growth, but it's like, okay, now maybe she goes to PA school, maybe she comes back and works for me. Who knows, right? Yeah. And you're giving her that rope. And then also having that conversation with your team that this is our growth plan. And then the person comes. The worst thing that could happen when you're out recruiting and you're looking for that passionate employee is that you find them too soon, and then they're awesome. So you have to plug them into another role or find a place for them where they're going to grow your business, or you stay in the same place you are. And so, I mean, you've got to give yourself a pat on the back for that. I think it's awesome how you've, managed to, grow your business in a way that not only affords success for you, but also for your employees. That's powerful. So
well, it's been fun. I mean, that's definitely been, when I look at my successes, and I do find that, I have three, and I have an MA that works for me now too. And, it's 3 people that I'm responsible for their financial success, or their success is based on my business being productive. And, they each individually bring a lot to the table. And so that's a lot of fun. I've, gotten over the fear of whether they're going to, be able to pay their bills and all those things, but it's a great opportunity to really kind of give back.
So what do you think has been the most rewarding aspect of growth?
Oh man. I think it's just a validation of that I know what I'm doing.
Mm,
Um, I know what I'm doing from a skill set. So, nothing makes me happier than when I see people out in public, and I obviously do my best to not make necessarily overt eye contact, but I have patients all the time running up to me. Oh my gosh, look at my lips. Don't they look amazing? Or, somebody's mom comes up and be like, oh, well, Sally looked so beautiful. She's so happy with her results. And thank you so much for, helping her feel more confident. And so, just the success of actually of helping people. This is an industry that I think sometimes gets a bad rap of being self or looking into self too much and being self-centered. And, I obviously there's some aspects of that, but I think that when you're able to give people self-confidence and the ability to feel better about who they are and what they look like, it just translates into so many other aspects of their life. And so, I find that I get a lot of joy from that. I will say I also get a lot of joy from the fact that I learned how to be a business owner. And that was not something when people ask me, did you always know you wanted to be a doctor? And my answer is usually yes, because I really couldn't think of anything else I wanted to do. I didn't grow up with doctors, but I just did well in school. And when I was growing up, that was kind of what the top students did. They either went to law school or medical school, it seemed like at the time, or at least that was my experience. And so I chose medicine, and it's worked out well for me, but I didn't really think of anything else that there was. And so it's been kind of fun to get to do two things, to do medicine and to be successful from a medical standpoint in this practice, but then also to look at it as I successfully built $1 million business, really with just some good support and some good luck.
wow. And hard work and commitment. And I would say too, like, I think something I admire about you is just, as you have catapulted, I mean, so quickly past the $1 million mark in your business, you've stayed so centered on, what I would say, like those small town values, I hear you saying the words like trust and patience and Sally, we're talking about people as people. And that's where the growth may not be as rapid or as, sort of like tangible when you're focused on the kind of unsexy things, which is just like the follow-ups with patients and, the making sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's dotted, but sustainably, you've done such an incredible job at that.
Okay.
So I want real quick, before we wrap up, for anybody who's not going to be able or is not attending AmSpa and not going to hear your talk, are there some highlights that you might be able to share with some of the Fierce Factor listeners?
Oh my goodness. See, should have written it better over my break. No, last year I gave a talk basically about what we talked about today. Starting from nothing. I'm a big fan of there's more than one way to get this done. Mm-hmm. I think this industry pushes down our throats that there's a variety of different ideas. There's the idea that you have to be a plastic surgeon in order to do face work. I would say that in general, most people would agree that that is not the majority of our industry anymore. Plastic surgeons do plastic surgery and they're surgeons and they do that because that's their entity. And I think that's one reason why injectors are now so many more nurses and other providers is that, they have gone to get the training. And I tell people all the time, I am not competing with the plastic surgeons. Plastic surgeons are surgeons, and I am an aesthetic provider. Mm-hmm. And so, I stay in my lane, and I'm not over there trying to learn how to do, breast augmentations or anything like that. So, but I don't blame them for maybe not necessarily having a full aesthetic injectable practice. So staying in your lane, not falling prey to big pharma coming in and telling you what you need to be ordering and how you need to be injecting it. Obviously, they have a lot of regulations, but I was seen as very much low man on the totem pole, single girl who's ordering 2 bottles at a time. And when I didn't fit into their I don't know, their pyramid or their scheme.
Like volume.
Yeah, it's their volume thing. When I was only ordering a few bottles at a time, I didn't gain the reputation. I didn't gain the respect or the benefits of, ordering 5,000 bottles of Botox every month. And so, I finally kind of took my toys and went and played somewhere else. And, I just think that this industry, and I've even just seen, having been in it in the last 3 years, there's lots of new providers and new industry leaders that are coming in, whether it's new fillers, new toxins, and they finally learned that, what, everybody starts from somewhere. And I would say every practice starts by ordering just a few boxes of Botox. And so you've got to give respect to that group of people and find the people that are going to be supportive of you. Find things that are the most beneficial to you from a financial standpoint. And then I'm a big fan of start small. And listen, there's no magic number. You don't have to stay small I only stayed small for a few months, but by not trying to jump in all at once. Like I said, my expenses were literally a $40 Amazon box and a few bags of syringes and a couple of boxes of Botox. And it didn't take long before I was purchasing equipment and lasers and other things. And those aren't bad. I love all the tricks that we have available to us, but that's not if your goal is just for making money, like you don't have to have all those things to do that. So start small, build it piece by piece. Don't get yourself in ridiculous amounts of debt. Mm-hmm. My office space is random. And I know that not everybody can have an office at their house. It's not in my house, don't worry, but it is across the property. It's on my property. So, my overhead at the beginning, even when I went outside of the bus, was just minimal. But, there's just a few things like that, but also get training outside of reps, get training outside of the weekend fast classes, figure out who, I've contacted, still to this day, I contact people that I watch on Instagram that I'm a huge fan of. And I contact them and I say, can I come train with you? Can I come observe? Can I come watch? Can I just see you do what you're doing? And, most of them have said yes. And so, just don't be afraid to kind of look outside of what you're told at the very beginning, kind of question basically what you're told.
Question everything.
Why? Yeah.
Why? Turn into a toddler.
Yeah, exactly. Why do you need me to order 50 boxes? Why are you only going to give me a discount if I do?
Yeah. Well, look, let's be real. We're vulnerable as young entrepreneurs. We don't, especially when we don't know things, we don't know what we don't know. And so we're extremely susceptible. And I've been there too, where I'm like, I need that software. I need that program. I need that, all the things. And it really comes down to the basics. You and a client that trusts you and, and take it from there. And, I think just trusting yourself too, in your gut, because when you have, you trust yourself, you can hear, you can listen, you have the answers inside, you can listen to what's that voice saying and kind of do it your own way. Right. I love that. Very good. So I'm excited for you and for your talk. And thank you for sharing those points with everybody. So can you are there any kind of final thoughts you would have for, obviously, you're a Fierce Factor listener yourself. And so as you're listening and you're like, hey, I wish somebody would have said this on the Fierce Factor podcast, or any final thoughts that you have,
No, I was the biggest, I am still the biggest fan junkie of the podcast. Every Monday morning I'm listening. In fact, I listened to the first 50 on a trip one time on an airplane. I'm not kidding. It was like overload. It asked me what any of them said, and I probably wouldn't know. But you know what? There's lots of ways to become successful. And I think social media is amazing. I've never had to pay for advertising. It is the reason that I had no advertising budget, because I just use social media to get my name out. But at the same time, it is such a comparison trap. And, I think that you have to decide, you have to kind of sit by yourself sometimes and just simply say, what are my goals? What is making me successful? What are the things I'm doing that are leading to my success? And for me, that was being honest with patients. I still, to this day, just right before I left for vacation, I had a patient and she was asking me about some treatment. And I was like, I just don't think you know what? I just don't love that treatment. Like it's not 100%. And you are asking me for 100% result. And that's not going to be for you. Like, I just don't think that's good for you. And she just looked at me. She's like, you are a horrible salesperson. I was like, good. I'm glad. Like I'm not trying to be a salesperson. I'm trying to be somebody that you trust and that you have faith in. And you know what? That patient will probably be my patient until I die or till I quit. But I try to be as honest as possible with people. I learned that from the beginning. At the beginning, I was concerned about how many patients I had and how busy I was and how much money I was making with each person. And when I quickly turned to, you know what, that will all come. But when you're honest with people and you literally have a true relationship, and it sounds so tongue in cheek, but when you truly care about what that person's results are, you're going to end up with better results than you could have if you were just simply after the dollar.
I love that. So, all right, you heard her, guys. Lots of ways to become successful. So trust your gut and really build that trust and rapport with your patients, and the success will come. You heard it from the queen herself, Dr. Sara Trammel.
Nice. I'm gonna tell my family that I got the queen today.
Yeah, real quick, let's how is that, like, having a neurosurgeon husband who's watched you just like completely, take over Abilene.
Take over Abilene. Well, it's been a huge shift for us. And I think we're still trying to figure some of that out, but he has been, and definitely was, my biggest cheerleader at the beginning. I mean, my goodness, he literally gave me the money to buy the airstream. He, waved me off and said, okay, I guess we'll be back. But he was the one out there stripping it down. I mean, he really has been my biggest supporter. He's so proud. And, there's just something to that just makes walking down the driveway and coming to work every day enjoyable. And I love that he helped me build it, and he helped me be there, or he was there with me kind of when I started. And it's been a big shift for our family. So literally going from a mom who's home and available all the time to now a full-time working mom. I mean, it's everybody has had to learn some positives and negatives there, but my girls are proud of me. They finally are convinced that I have a job. It took them forever to figure out what I did. They weren't convinced that I had actually gone to medical school because I don't know, wear a stethoscope yeah. I mean, they still would question me, and they're like, what is it you do? Like, what do you do? Who are you? My youngest one was so mad when I switched over, because I was doing, like I said, hospice before. And she was like, I finally learned what hospice was. She was probably, I guess, about 8 at the time. And then she, Mother's Day, they write those horrible papers where they ask them the questions, like, how much do you weigh and how old is your mom? And you're like 900 pounds and 70. So they asked her, what does your mom do? And this was right after I started. And she wrote, she does Botox. And I was like, oh, I have finally come to it. Like, I have finally won. She knows what I do. And so anyway, they're hilarious. They, at all of our events, they're there, and they have on the shirts, and they're now at the age, they're 12 and 14 and 15. So they're helpers, and they help serve, and they blow up balloons, and they do the thing. So it's a cute, it's a fun family business that, you know, they're proud of, I'm proud of, my husband is very proud of. So, but yeah, it's definitely a transition. So.
No, I mean, what an incredible example to your girls, to show them that, you know, you get to do just follow your passion, you know, and just to see what's possible in life, and obviously to have such a supportive family. So, all right. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of your pearls of wisdom with us today. And and if you have, so how can people learn more about you? I'm sure plenty of people are going to want to get on that dump list of where to go get great training, and probably just train with you as well in Abilene.
Yeah, seriously. So our website is Abilene, which is Abilene, which I'm sure Kaylee will put on somewhere. AbileneBeautyBus.com. That's our tag on Instagram and Facebook. I have my own that I haven't had much time to put things on, but it's at Dr. Sara Trammel.
Yeah, I'll hook that up for you.
We'll hook it all up. But yeah, and then both my estheticians have their own accounts as well. So we'll give you all the things. But yes, and then feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share all the details. So
yes, and she's fun to talk to.
Especially after a drink or two, right?
Yes, we have had some fun conversations over there. All right, Dr. T, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.